I'd like to welcome to the JPP, the Jewish Philanthropy Podcast, Oded Hermoni. Hermoni.
You said it right. In Hebrew, it's Hermoni. In English, it's Hermoni.
Okay, it's Hermoni and Hermoni, general partner and co-founder, J Ventures and J Angels. In the past 15 years, Oded has invested in many industries as a partner in Rhodium VC, J Ventures, and a J Angel. Most of the investments were in Silicon Valley, New York City, and Israel. Oded has been an entrepreneur, investor, and experienced high-tech executive in over 40 companies in Silicon Valley and Tel Aviv. As a board member, observer, founder, consultant, and manager, he's obviously a big player in the VC space. He's made a lot of different investments, which we'll include in the bio, but we're not going to articulate them all now. He's also, importantly, a leader in connecting the American Jewish community and the many Israelis working in Silicon Valley, which is something that we're going to emphasize and speak about. He was born in Jerusalem. He began his career as a journalist, covering the country's flourishing technology sector. He took an active role in that sector by founding 2 startups. He became a leader in the high-tech industry in Israel, founding the country's high-tech industry association before he, his wife Ravit, and their young son relocated to the Bay Area, to the Palo Alto area in 2011. And upon his arrival there, he found an already well-established Israeli community on the South Peninsula. Oded, thank you so much for making the time. I know you've been busy traveling to Israel, back here to the States. I appreciate having a few minutes to talk to you about the work that you're involved in, the situation in the world, the situation in Israel. So thank you for being here.
I just want to mention, you're right about J Angel, J Ventures. J Ventures is a group that has another fund that is dedicated for Tikkun Olam called J Impact that Eran Sandoz is the co-GP.
Okay, terrific. Okay, so let's begin. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. Who are you in your own words?
I'm Israeli. I can change my accent after many years in the US. I'm Jewish and Israeli, and Zionist. I've been trying to do things that are not always combined, and I really think that are important for me, which is mission-driven, making impact, good impact, and doing business. So I manage in my life to combine the two things. From the beginning, I became a journalist in order to change things. And when I did my first startup that I sold to Yellow Pages, it was to find jobs for people who couldn't find jobs. And we were able to bring them to work in houses, and to complete income that they couldn't complete otherwise. So for me, it was pure impact thing to see those emails from those people that now could afford computers for the kids or food and other things that they couldn't. And then I, in a Zionist way, I joined a VC fund that we took public. Don't try it at home. That invested in the south and the north of Israel. So we try to believe that you can build unicorns out of the peripheral of Israel, not just Tel Aviv. We managed to do one of those unicorns. That was a great example of the fact that you have bright people in the south and in the north, not only in the center. And then I established the Israeli High-Tech Industry Association, now called IETI. Again, it's a reserve duty. I thought that how we can bring together all this ecosystem of 250,000 people that are not connected. After that, moved to the US with my wife, as you mentioned, joined Rhodium, which is just a VC fund by the Rekanati family, used to be the largest family office in Israel. But
that's the wine company, Rekanati. It's the same wine.
Also wine, basketball. They had many companies in Israel, including Discount Bank and Cloud Insurance and Cellcom and Delek and others. There's hundreds of companies. IDB was one of the biggest conglomerates. And then I was partnering with them, and I was the American partner in that fund. That was a very successful one. And then I felt there's something missing in my own Jewishness. I'm Israeli, and moving to the US, I never thought twice about. I took my Jewishness as for granted because in Israel, we're all Jewish if you are Jewish. And moving to the US, I didn't have a legacy. So I was thinking about my son coming to me and asking, what if he wants to be, and I said I don't have the tools to explain to him about Judaism. I don't know enough. It's out of ignorance. In Israel, secular people just don't learn enough about, because it's very political. And so I started my own journey to understand what it is to be a diaspora Jew. And one of the things I realized is there's no connection between American Jews and Israelis. It's like two separate tribes. And I got a confirmation when I decided that American Jews donate money, Israeli donate blood. As an American Jew, I need to donate money. And I went to the Jewish Federation Day of Philanthropy, which is connected to what you're talking about. And I was probably one of the only Israelis in the hall. There were lots of, the average age was 74, and it was mostly women, Jewish women. And I came with a wallet and I asked, how do I donate money? And at that time, they had a survey that said that 46% of the Jews in the Bay Area don't feel connected to Israel. And that led me to the confirmation that we need to do something in order to connect them. I didn't know many American Jews at that time, but two of them, Jim Koshland, who became my partner later on, was the chairman of the Jewish Federation, and I think he was on every Jewish board ever. He was on the board of Levi's that his family was managing, and a very amazing person. I learned from a lot. And the other person is my North Star for many years. Her name is Laura Lauder, that really taught me, I think, everything I know about philanthropy and Judaism and doing good and doing well. And also two other people, Jim Scheinman and Dan Rubin, both of them also recommended that I would be joining Wexner Heritage program that also exposed me a lot about Judaism. So together with Laura and Jim, we thought about how we build this kind of platform that brings Jews and Israelis, American Jews and Israelis together without patronizing, which is one of the problems, how they come equally, and how we keep them in the room when they enter. How they enter into the room, but what keeps them inside? And how do we gain trust? Because one of the biggest problems of the Jewish world is that we don't trust each other. Orthodox and Reform, Republicans and Democrats, J Street and AIPAC, we are very, very fragmented. So we figured out that 2,000 years of diaspora, one of the things that kept us all very, very strong and trustworthy is that we did business together.
Mm-hmm.
You would never do business with someone you don't trust. And with that logic in mind, we built the first group called J Angels. It was 60% American Jews and 40% Israelis, because any American Jew who entered the room with few Israelis heard the Hebrew was so loud. We are very loud, so we had to balance it. We didn't charge money. We paid for everything. So it was how we can pick the right mensch to be part of this group. And this was a smart decision. And we started to invest in companies. We didn't take anything out of it. We invested in 13 companies. There were 6 exits very early on.
Let me interrupt you for a second. This was by invitation, or this was like putting out like on social media, putting up sides of the community?
No. We never invite. No, it was very, very personal. It was either me and Jim, 60%, 40%, always keeping this ratio. Also, women, men, we try to do lots of things that are keeping this kind of balance. And later on, it was just a friends bring a friend, a sibling bring a sibling. We have about 35.
Tapping into your networks, bringing people together from different walks of life, different backgrounds, diaspora Jewry, Israeli, and trying to get them to work together and coexist and build trust and build knock down bridges, and do that through the mechanism of investment, through business.
Yeah. And in order to keep them that way, you need to have very good investments. So the access to good investment is crucial, and the quality of the people is also crucial. So our test is not the wealth. We have 40 billionaires. We have a lot of people who are very, very accomplished, but it's about who they are. It's about if they are womensch, we call it mensch or womensch.
I never heard that's a great term. I never heard that before. Womensch. I love that. Okay, great.
Yeah, because we don't want to exclude anyone. We want them to feel part of it. And so we created something that when we started as an angel group, we just met once a month and just saw companies, and we started working together and getting to know each other. So suddenly people didn't see, like, both of us had glasses and beard. You have a yarmulke, I don't have a yarmulke. But right now we look at what is more common between us and not what differentiates us. And we gain the trust because, hey, I know what's your quality and you know my quality. So we start from a different place. We don't see about the differences, we see about what's bring us together.
So super necessary in today's world, 100%. 100%. Let me take this one step back. I'm just curious a little bit, just where you grew up. Tell me a little bit about just your, like, as a young boy, where did you grow up? Like, what was your life like in that regard?
So I was born in Jerusalem,
Where in Jerusalem?
in Neve Yaakov, and then Bet Hakerem, and then the German colony.
Okay.
In a very strange turnout of life, I was born 10 days after my first dad died in Yom Kippur War. And he died as a major in the tank platoons just 50 years, exactly 50 years on an hour when the attack of the Hamas on the
Whoa.
same
Wait.
time.
So you're saying your biological father died 10 days before you were born, you said?
Yeah, I'm named after him. His name
Wow.
was Major Oded Hermoni. I'm Captain Oded Hermoni. I never wanted to be a major.
Wow. And fast forward 50 years, you're saying it came out the same time of the death of your father was when this attack started.
Right. And we were in Sukkot, in a sukkah of one of our friends, and I felt something coming. And I said, and my wife said, what happened to you? You're always so social, and now you are like, you are freaking out. Something happens to you. And I said, listen, I can't stay. I think something is happening. Went home, and at the same time, because of the time differences, the rocket started, and then the invasion started. So it was really in the Kish case, we said.
Wow.
And so I grew up in Jerusalem. I have an amazing stepdad who's a professor at UCLA and Hebrew University. His name is Rafi Levin. My mom is an artist and has a PhD in biochemistry. And she also named after her sister who died in the Holocaust. And she discovered it very late in her life and started to paint two girls looking for each other. And so she became a known artist. I have two paintings here, including in the Holocaust Museum in Chicago and others. Very strong paintings. Her name is Dr. Mira Hermoni Levin.
Wow.
And so this is how I grew up. We spent 1 year in Boston when I was in 9th grade, 10th grade. But every summer we spent in Cambridge, MIT Day Camp. And then I went to two schools who brought together Israelis from different backgrounds. One was the high school named Boyer, which brings it's very close to Himmelfarb, which is a religious school.
Sure.
So this was a good experience. Then I joined the Israeli army as the IDF spokesperson unit, because in Israel, when you are a son of someone who passed away during his army service, the mother has the responsibility to decide if you are going to serve as a combat soldiers or not. I left my house because I wanted to be a combat soldier. The deputy of the chief of staff called me, who was a friend of the family, and said, you can ask your mom everything, but you can't ask her to sign you for being a combat soldier. So I decided that I will be serving in the IDF spokesperson unit in the West Bank. So all my army service, I was shot, I was thrown Molotov bottles, and I've seen lots of events. It was a very interesting and very strange and crazy kind of years that we started with the Intifada and then end up shaking hands with the Palestinians in Taba and making the peace of what, the Oslo agreements and giving them ABC places. So it gave me it's a lot of responsibility as a young soldier, first for the lives of people that you are commanding, but more of that for every word that you say, because wrong word can lead into a very, very fatal consequences. And then I was injured in the last months of my service. I was hit in my head, and I lost some of my memory. and one of the people who served with me was waiting for me, and we opened a PR agency. But I had a lot of mistakes in Hebrew because I couldn't remember how you write mom in Hebrew. It's Ima Aleph Mem Aleph, but for me it was Aleph Mem Ain. I couldn't see the difference.
Wow.
And I worked a lot to correct it, bought a computer and relearned how to write and read.
Wow.
And learn how strong we are as human beings. And then I became a journalist, and which I did for 9 years. I was an editor at Haaretz, one of the editorial members, one of the founders of The Market, which is the Israeli, one of the leading economy newspapers. And I was writing about tech, mostly.
Wow, it's a fascinating story. Let me ask you. You know, I see a lot this right now. The IDF spokesperson during the war. I forgot it. What's his
Gary,
name?
yeah,
What's his name?
Gary, Tatarov Gary.
Okay, so he's like in right. He's like in like it looks like he's in Gaza, right? A lot of times he was.
He's a Navy SEAL commander. In
Oh,
his,
I didn't even know. You're saying being spokesperson doesn't preclude you from having been like in the infantry, etc. It's just an addition. You mean? Okay, I hear. Wow, fascinating. So in your position when you were the IDF spokesperson on the West Bank, so you said you weren't a combat soldier, correct? And yet you were still getting.
Well, I was carrying gun and I had to protect myself. I didn't have to shoot anyone, thankful. I wasn't looking for this. I was looking, but the West Bank,
You're
you're born
exposed on
in
the front
Israel,
line.
so
Yeah.
you serve. You have a jeep, you have gun, you have a rifle, and you are.
Right.
But no, thank God, I didn't have to do any of those things. I didn't want to shoot anyone.
I think so many of us following the current war so closely, like we read every story, you know, like again, American person, I'm talking about an American like myself, right? Very connected to Israel, but I've never been in the army, you know, and you read and this, you think you know what's going on, but I have this funny feeling that we're missing a lot. Like we don't really understand kind of like what's really going on the ground.
I think, I think the army, first of all, gives you a perspective as an Israeli, and also give you a perspective, um, as a human being, because when we try to say that Israel has the highest, the most moral army in the world, what we mean is that we ask our soldiers to think, not just to obey commands, to think, because they understand that every circumstances could lead into something much bigger. So it's very different from other armies that are very much obeying to the rank. And if you look at how the basic training in Israel starts and ends, it starts with everybody's all the time in a I would say, a square, and the commander stands in front of them. And once they finish the basic training, it becomes a circle, and everybody's hugging each other, and the commander is one of them. So it's a very, very strange way of commanding people, that you want them to think and have their own thought and to be considered, but still they need to trust that you are the commander that knows what he's doing, and you have the ability to make a decision. So you learn a lot from that. I learned also a lot from understanding the media that way, because you understand that every crossroad, there's something happening in this crossroad, have different angles, and the BBC can take one angle that would be very much against Israel of the same event, and CNN can take the other one, or Fox, and see it from a different angle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. By the way, I just want to share, if I can, a Dvar Torah for a second, because the way you described how the training works with the commander and the integration, it reminded me of something. It's like a little bit of a chidush, but I hope the audience will appreciate it in the sense that, and this is called the Simchat Torah War, so it's very much connected in the sense that we have a concept that during Sukkot, during the festival of Sukkot, so we do what's called Hoshanot, we do Hakafot. We walk around the bima, and the Sefer Torah is placed in the center. And then it's pointed out that when Simchat Torah comes, we of course do hakafot with the Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah leaves kind of the center. It goes on the outside as part of the circle, and we leave the middle empty, right? So, and there's a lot of Torah that you could explain, that the middle is the Shekhinah, it's God's presence, but it's beautiful in terms of this analogy, right? That you start off like in a circle, and the commander, like, you know, like the Torah Hashem is like in the middle. But then, as you progress in that process of the Chag, so ultimately the Shekhinah or the Torah then becomes part and parcel of the Jewish people who are walking around, with those. So it's very
Beautiful. I think,
instructive.
the Jewish, I think for me, one of the biggest discoveries as an Israeli secular who moved outside of Israel and learned Torah afterwards, as an American Jew, was to see how much wisdom and sensitivity there's in the Torah. How much I think we're missing because we don't know, but we don't think about how smart it is. Just beyond just, rules and things like that. It's not about how you put your yamul cow, tzitzit, or things like that, but there's so much thoughts behind it. And
I got Chachma Elokit, like there's a higher level of wisdom,
right.
a meta wisdom.
And you can imagine people think that deeply. It's something beyond, and it's very interesting. I find it very extremely interesting.
I want to ask you a question. It's a little bit of a personal question, but I'm curious. My whole life I've lived in Israel for about 5 years of my 51 years, but I've lived most of my life here in the United States. And you always find Israelis everywhere you go in the world, right? Particularly, in the I live in a community here in the 5 towns in New York. There are tons of Israelis. We have like an Israeli Beit Knesset, basically, right behind my house. Why are so many, like, why? I mean, this, again, it's probably different for every person. I used to think it was because, I don't know, like the Israelis would do the army, they'd be attracted to the good life in America. I'm curious, like, why did you move to America? I know it sounds like, look, you grew up spending time in America. It sounds like, but like, why do Israelis move to America? Like, I mean, maybe it's a silly question. I don't know. But I'm putting it out there.
Why do you move to America? Why do you want to live in America?
Yeah.
I'll be honest. For many years, I remember myself in Logan Airport, young kid meeting old Jewish couple, survivor of the Holocaust, and asking them, "What are you doing here? This is not your country. There's only one country for the Jewish people, which is Israel." Growing up later, understanding how important it is that we have diaspora Jews, first of all, and this dancing between Israel and and diaspora Jews, and how important it is to have the people who buffer the Israelis in America. But I think people see themselves. Listen, Israel is an amazing place. It's a very complicated place, and also America is very complicated for some. We are witnessing now anti-Semitism that we never witnessed before. I think people are looking to their own life and how to secure the kids. My wife grew up in Pennsylvania and made Aliyah when she was 18. She served in the army. She was an officer. And for us, it was another opportunity to show our kids a different kind of. There's something very unique about America that is not something in Israel, like the sensitivity to other religions, the understanding that this universe is much more holistic than just living in one country, always with a gun, always fighting for your future. And I think my kids, who are very Israeli in their nature, though they grew up in the States, they combine these things. Some of the chutzpah from Israel that we encourage, and some of the empathy to others, which is also important.
No, I really don't judge anybody. People could judge me. Why do I live here in America? Why don't I live in Israel, and vice versa? It is interesting. It is interesting that on the one hand, so many people want to live in Israel so badly, and yet there's so many people that seemingly grew up there and don't want to live there. It's just kind of an observation. It's interesting.
An interesting fact about Israel is it's the only country in the world that you have more people who are being buried than dead. So at the end of the station, more people want to live in Israel. So they died elsewhere. They died sometimes in the US or elsewhere, but they come to be buried in Israel. So no, at the end of the day, you want
we're all
to
going back. We're all going back there. That's for sure. It's a question of it's discussed in the Talmud Yerushalmi, this idea. But no, I appreciate. I hear that. Let's pivot a little bit, if we can. I think you have a very unique perspective on the events as you shared. You felt the anxiety before you even knew what was happening on this Simchat Torah. I'd love to hear a little bit, just from your perspective. I'm sure you have many friends who are in the army, who are in Israel, who have, you're probably much closer to events than a lot of our listeners are. Just love to hear your perspectives on the outbreak of the war and what's going on in terms of the Hasbara. Even you have an expertise in that area. How Israel is doing, what areas we could be doing better in. I'd love to hear just a bunch of your thoughts on what's unfolding. The hostages. I mean, Ein L'Davar Sof. There's a lot to talk about, obviously.
Listen, I'm coming from Israel after 10 days that I saw a different country. I think we are all still in a trauma or starting to get post-trauma and shock. What happened on October 7th is something that I think it was hard for all of us to understand. I'm speaking about any human being. When you start to understand the kind of things that's been done to Israeli families, civilians, women, men, kids, elderly, it's unbelievable,
right?
Unacceptable. And I don't speak only as an Israeli. I mean, I'm speaking as a human being, and I think
the magnitude of the depravity, and we keep learning more and more about it, is sickening. I mean, it's just it's subhuman, right? We're not talking about behavior of human beings. I mean, we're not.
And the first week of the war, I didn't get out from the house. I was just very busy in helping Israel any way I could. And also our community, and directing them to donate money to United Hatzalah and Natal and other organizations. But what really, I think that when you are very much involved and you don't feel the pain, it's very, you're busy in working and solving and helping. So I was working 24 hours almost. I didn't sleep, and I was just around the clock with that. And then the Monday after the October 7th, I got a call from a very close friend, part of my community of J Ventures, Ruby Khan, which I know for 20 years. And he called me and said, Oded, help me to find my son, Itai. We don't know if he's a hostage or he died in action. He's missing in action right now. And also help me to put this on brands that people will know about Itai. He's a US citizen. He was a soldier in the Israeli army. And bring me to CNN and others. And we introduced him to a lot of media hubs to tell the story. Ruby and Hagit, his wife, and the kids are really struggling. And it's and after his call, that I was very, very calm in this call, I broke up completely. And my son said, Dad, this is the first time I see you crying in my life. And I'll be honest, I cried a lot since then. I think Israelis, when I came to Israel, and I'm speaking a lot with my friends, many of them are still in reserve, though they are older, they're just volunteering. I called my unit to see if they need me, and they said they don't. And others just volunteer in any way they can. Some put showers on trucks just to let the soldiers make some shower, or others just make food. It's a very, what I've seen is a very impressive civil society that is strong and united. And keep in mind that for many years, for political reasons on both sides, people try to make us ununited and very fragmented. And I think most of the people, whether it's Haredi that joined the army for the first time, 3,000 of them, to seculars who are opening their heart to see others and welcoming them, we became one. Now there are in the sides, there are people who are still extreme and they are looking what we shouldn't be together. But the basic is very, very united, which is overwhelming to see.
B'yachad ninatzeach, right? That's one of the themes, right? That together we're going to be victorious.
Yeah, together we will win, and it's really together. And in so many ways, it became from one day from Startup Nation to a very militant, nationalist, very, very sad country. People don't use the horn. If you've been to Israel for 5 years, people use the horn all the time. You don't hear horns anymore. People are very compassionate to others. We do see that the government is absent in action, which is another evidence of something that happens in Israel. And I think this reflects also the relationship between diaspora Jews and Israel right now, because the Israelis as people approach the American Jews and ask, after many years that Israel is very strong financially, they ask for aid. They ask for money, they ask to support the units, they ask to support the hospitals and lots of other things, because on a normal day, the government would support it. And suddenly the vacuum that was created pushed them into other places. But this also creates new relationship, because when people donate, they also have a voice, and it creates a partnership. So this is one side. The other side is the shame. I mean, we grew up in the past 10 years as one of the strongest economies in the world, very strong shekel, very strong startup nation, very strong technology, and very strong army. And this army failed, and this technology failed. And it took us time to realize that out of the ashes, how we grow up into a stronger army, a stronger technology, stronger startup nation, but what kind of help we need from others. For example, I think one of the things we need to keep all the time in mind that startup nation can fall. We need all the time to work to support the Israeli startups that right now doesn't have funding from non-Jewish or Israeli sources. So there are lots of things that come together. I think it's a horrible thing. It's really it's the most horrible day in the history of the Jewish people. If you think about the biggest pogroms, were not even close to that number, or the brutality of the things that happened. And we are a country that been 12 hours, part of it was occupied by just people on Toyotas and bikes. So we learned the lesson. I think the hybris is less. We are here to start rebuilding Israel in a better way.
Right.
Not the past 10 years, people mostly thought about themselves, and now they need to think about as a country. I think also American Jews and other diaspora Jews need to start thinking, what is Israel for them? Because anti-Semitism is rising. And at the end, this is the home of the Jewish world, and how we support it, how we make sure that it's never again in the modern history again. We saw the support of United States. We saw the support of Biden as, I think, one of the most significant American presidents ever to support Israel in the most crucial time. Without America, I don't know what would have happened. And we see the responsibility that is now lying between the Israelis and the American Jews, and what is going ahead of this. And also for us, it's a VC fund. SJ Ventures is a combination of a community and a VC fund, and we call it the capitalist kibbutz, right? This is the name that we are located. Because everybody's equal, by the way. They put the same amount of money. Everybody invests 100 to 300, 400, but the billionaires, millionaires, normal people can invest the same amount of money. And we say no to 10 million, and we say no to 20 million, because it's important for us to keep everybody's equal. Mm-hmm. But we saw this community rising together, working, donating, supporting, thinking very equally. Through the WhatsApp groups, through meetings. It was amazing thing to witness and to see the impact that those people really had on Israel. The fear of anti-Semitism is very, very vivid by everybody, because we have 39 different Jewish communities, including Israel. And in Israel, you don't feel the anti-Semitism, but anywhere else, you do feel it. It's something that is coming from the, back to the surface, and people talk about it.
No, for sure. I was in Europe a week or two after the war broke out for various reasons. I was in 2 different countries, and I never in my life ever thought walking around London I'd have to be concerned. People telling me you can't even go certain places. It's a different world. It's frightening. What's your perspective? I mean, I don't even know how to wrap my head around the hostage situation. I mean, I think in our worst nightmare, we've seen, 1 or 2 hostages, grabbed over the years in different contexts. But the magnitude or the amount of people that were taken is just is beyond beyond comprehension. And it's, you know, I understand, like, you know, it's like you said, your friend, the family member, like, you know, you have to advocate for your loved one as best as you can. Obviously, the government has different calculations and cheshbonot, and I don't know, how do you even wrap your head around such a situation? I don't even know what you do with that.
I always think that I can't put myself in the shoes of the families that are having the kidnapped over there. I know what happens when someone, you know, when you lose your dad in a war. It's been 50 years, and the impact of that loss. And my father was someone that everybody thought it would be prime minister one day.
Really?
Yeah, and many people still write. There were 3 books that was dedicated to Hermoni in the past 3 years.
I'm
I
going to
mean,
read about him right after we get off. I'm very curious to learn more
he
about
was
him.
he was the head of the student council in Israel, the student body of all Israel, and was the first mayor of the youth town. And he was asked to be a member of the Knesset by Golda and decided to stay in the army because for him, education, the way he looked at the army is that the army should address education for all. So you get in differently, but you need to go out in the same way with SAT. Was a very special person. I didn't meet him, so I just can guess. But at least 2 prime ministers of Israel said that he would probably be a prime minister today. But what I'm saying is that the loss of someone like this has such an impact on my life. One of the reasons why we moved to the US is to be a bit away from my father that has the same name. I'm thinking about 1,400 people who died in this war, and they're dead, and their families, the kids, the relatives, the friends have this trauma so badly in their life for the rest of their life.
Right.
And
The
I
hashpachot
can't even anticipate how it is because right now they're in the war, but the loss will stay with them forever. And then the people who have been kidnapped, and just we pray for God to bring them back. I can't imagine being a father of someone who's being hostage right now. I can't think about the parents of those kids being kidnapped. They are like 1 year, 3 years old kids, and the stories about torturing that we hear, and the other stories that we hear. I don't know. I'm not a prime minister. Um, and in I think the whole government and the whole Knesset should resign, by the way.
I would think that, right? I mean, I
All
don't
of
know how
them.
you can have anything
No
else.
political stand, just all of them.
Right.
They didn't serve the people, they served themselves. And I don't envy the decision right now in this. It's almost like Shlomo's question,
Right.
what to do. I
Putting,
mean, you have,
by the way, before I got on this call with you, I saw that Gadi Eisenkot's son was killed in battle. Right.
I
Like,
didn't.
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, like in the Israeli army, it doesn't matter how high up you are, your kids are, you know, I saw.
Look about the people who died in the first day. There were 3 colonels who died, and 3 ranks colonel. I don't know how you say it in English.
Very high ranking, right?
But that's part of the Israeli army. They are the first one to fight. They're not sending the troops ahead. They are fighting.
Right.
And I have people in my community of J Ventures who just landed that day, took the gun, and went down to fight. They are
Wow.
not in uniforms. They are not in 2 of them. The braveness of the Israeli people should be told. It's the first thing that keeps us optimistic. There's nothing like the Israeli people. There's a rotten government and Knesset, this is we know. But the quality of the people themselves, regardless where they come from the background, it's not about the background. We are united.
Right.
And the Jewish people is outstanding, and the support that Israel has. But I don't have much more thought.
No,
Just pray,
I hear. Well,
praying and
I know
crying.
you have. I know you have to go in a minute. So we're gonna end with the final question. Uh, just this is a philanthropy podcast. You mentioned before United Hatzalah and all the different causes that you were involved in at the beginning of the war. Just share for a minute, like your thought process. And you know, everybody is dipping deep into their pockets to help so many different things. How do you think about it? How do you assess kind of like, you know, priority? There's so many needs in Israel. How do you, like, from your vantage point, where do you think you know, resources are most needed at the moment?
So J Ventures is a fund, and we have allocated part of my carry and Jim's carry to a foundation that, when we return the fund, goes back to the community, and the kibbutz decides where to donate it to. The other
That was
thing,
before the war started, right? I mean, that was probably
yeah, this is the concept that if the community um can be rewarded because of the accomplishment, then they can give back to the community.
right.
And Law allowed the chairman of that one. The whole concept of J Ventures was that the subtext is not less important from the front, which is we created the largest Jewish on the cloud community, and it's united. We thought in the 7 years of creating J Ventures, we thought that one day we need to have this kind of bringing Jews together and thinking as Jews, not first, and not thinking what departs us. So contributing and donations is not only by money, it's also by activity and but what you really create, the reality that you create. So one thing is that we created Tikkun Olam Fund called J Impact, which I'm very proud of, because we have companies like Bee Hero, which is an Israeli company that does AI for beehives, and being named as one of the most important climate and environment companies in the world today. Another company is Epic Cleantech, which take reuse of rainwater and been named by Time Magazine as one of the most innovative companies in the world. So doing well and doing good is something that very much like this. Then during the war, I never thought we will do something like this, but we there was a festival of aid. People really wanted to help, and they started donating money and giving things that were not needed, to be honest. Like people donated black ceramic vests that the Hamas is using. So there was a lots of goodwill, but we didn't go to the right direction. And because we have 85 people in Israel for our community, amazing families and accomplished business people, they are on the ground. So they address the needs. And what we decided to do is to have a specific donation fund, but emergency fund that sees the real need right now, where the government is not there, and the Jewish agency is not there, and the Jewish federations are not there yet. The kibbutzim who've been hurt and damaged by the orphans who lost their parents completely. We have 21 orphans. The hostages, medical equipment in the hospital. So we donated to those areas. We donated to 19 organizations over 3 weeks. We had $600,000 that were after our people already donated millions of dollars from their own. We decided to do a small funds. We wanted 500, it became 600. We brought amazing people like Guy Miaznik and Kathy Fields and Loa and Jim and many others. It was a very balance between Israelis and American Jews, and we had American Jews from different places. Sandy, who was the head of Schusterman Foundation for 25 years, and just really amazing people who were there. And in Israel, we brought people from our community who were in Nachal Oz. There are people who lived in Nachal Oz. We have people from Nirim and other kibbutzim there that are part of our community of J Ventures.
Wow.
We have settlers and others, and they gave a very interesting perspective of what is really important. And this is where we dedicated the money to, mental health as well. And it was easy to decide because the needs are so clear. We focus on mental health, on healthcare, on the orphans, on the hostages, and on the kibbutzim. This was our 5 elements. And we tried also Hasbara. You asked me about Hasbara, and I must admit that the Hasbara in Israel is just like everything else, is very much being done by private initiatives instead of the government. Now the government is getting into the right place, and we have 6 people who are responsible for Hasbara. But we're losing a war. We're losing a war because the enemy, or so-called enemy, is much more strong and thoughtful about this world. We are very much active in diaspora internally instead of externally. And we have a good cause. But even if that we have the Israeli army is so careful about killing civilians and being hurt himself, so it took us 2 weeks to get into Gaza. And think about it: if you get hit by someone and you hit him back, this is self-defense. But if it takes you 2 weeks to give back, then this is not something that you're attacking someone. So the world lost some of his empathy to Israel. Now we really see the stories, and they're horrible. And that's the story.
Yeah, it's super complicated in the sense that we hurt ourselves. It's hard to even explain, right? The level that we sometimes undermine ourselves because we're going to the umpth degree of trying to, care about that public opinion, so on and so forth. We put ourselves, yadenu ala tachtona, we often put ourselves into, a difficult situation because of it. It's unfolding, and it's hard to comprehend. But Oded, I appreciate so much making a little bit of time, getting acquainted a little bit. I think your perspectives are very valuable. I want to commend you, of course, for the great work that you're doing, integrating American Jewry, world Jewry with Israeli Jewry, and something that's so needed and so powerful and so impactful, particularly in these times. And I want to give you a bracha that you should have good health and continue. Hashem, God should give you the kochot, the abilities to continue to inspire and to help and to contribute l'takein olam, to rectify and to fix a broken world. Okay, thank you so much.
I'm not doing it alone, David. Really, this community of 500 people across the world is just outstanding people, really. And 150 of them are sitting on Jewish board. They all care. Those are people who are mentioned, women, as I said, and I'm blessed to be part of it. Just amazing, really. Invite you one day to see how it works. It's just amazing kibbutz.
Yeah, I'd love to. And it's a chizuk to really realize and appreciate that we are part of a very special nation. Whatever, like you said, whether it's a kippah or not a kippah or whatever it is,
doesn't matter.
We have amazing people with very big hearts who feel part of us and care and want to help. And that's a big chizuk in these very, very challenging times that we're in.
David, thank you so much for this conversation. Really gave me a good strength as well. Toda rabah.
Toda.